Today's episode of Bleav in Steelers is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. NFL free agency is next week. We're a month away from the NFL draft. We're also into the month of March, which means the madness is here. Get in on the sports betting action today over at BetOnline.ag. There's also NBA, NHL. Head over to BetOnline.ag to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. Welcome into the Bleav in Steelers show. My name is Mark Bergin. Really excited today. Friday edition of the show. We welcome in Brian Batko. He is beat writer for the Pittsburgh Steelers for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Brian, welcome in.
Thanks, Mark. How's it going, man?
It's going okay. We're going to get into free agency, but we're going to start today's show. Chargers cut Joey Bosa. Raiders give Maxx Crosby a huge extension. TJ Watt is entering the final year of his contract. What do these moves mean for the Steelers edge rusher TJ Watt?
Well, I think if Joey Bosa goes and plays with his brother in San Francisco, that means J.J. Watt needs to come out of retirement and link up with TJ in Pittsburgh for the Steelers. That would be the only counter move there, I think. But no, I mean that the Chargers cutting Bosa, I think that was one that just he hasn't been able to stay healthy. They've got to bring back Khalil Mack, who's still going strong. He's aging like a fine wine, like Cam Hayward is here in Pittsburgh. But the Crosby deal was interesting because that one I do think could potentially cause the TJ Steeler team to get maybe a little more tent than they might have. And, they went on, I guess it was the McAfee show. They said it's always better to get those things done earlier than later. But we know the Steelers usually like to go right up until the deadlines force them to make a move one way or the other. So I don't want to say things are going to become contentious, but I just think it's another added layer of trickiness for both sides involved there because the Raiders backed up the Brinks truck for Crosby. TJ is going to want something similar. Plus he's probably due to be a dad here soon. So he's going to be sleeping less. He's probably just going to be a little bit more irritable here now that he's dealing with the baby.
If JJ's coming back out of retirement, let's just get the whole band back together and bring Derek along, and we'll have the Watt brothers trio back in Pittsburgh. What say you?
Yeah, I think that Arthur Smith offense needs more of a true fullback. Connor Hayward was miscast there at times last year and hasn't really become that type of player in the NFL. So yeah, I know Derek announced his retirement and all that, and he's enjoying dad life. But yeah, got to get all three brothers united once and for all, at least for the preseason.
I look at the Crosby deal and it's like, oh, all this money and the most amount ever for a non-quarterback. And it's like, great, this is going to be broken again next offseason with TJ Watt if the Steelers let it get to that point. So it's one of those things where you don't want to let your best player walk. But I look at it, I'm like, well, the Chargers seem to be trending upward with Harbaugh, and they're just letting this guy go at the age of 29 in Bosa. I think the big difference, though, from what I've read, is the availability and the fact that he's played, it's 28 games in the last 3 seasons. If you're paying a premium for that type of player, you've got to be able to stay healthy. So the ability is maybe not quite there. I'd probably put Watt at the top if I were to power rank the 3. But I think the big thing of, why is Bosa a free agent? I think it's the health concerns that you have there for what you're paying him. And I think that's really what ultimately led to the decision to let him go in Los Angeles.
And what also always causes these discussions to get a little bit thorny from both sides is there's always going to be a certain logic to, okay, look what I've done to this point in the league. If you're TJ Watt, you're going to say, I've got 1 Defensive Player of the Year award on my mantle, probably should have 2 overall production better than Maxx Crosby. And yeah, like you said, Mark, look how I've stayed healthy for the most part these last couple years. We know he went down, 2022? The 2022 season, missed a lot of time with that pec injury, and he missed the Bill playoff game a couple years ago. But otherwise, he's been, really durable for the Steelers. However, these teams, and the Raiders said this when they paid Crosby this week, was we're not paying you for what you've done. We're paying you for what you're about to do. And any smart organization is not paying for past performance. They are paying to project out. And the last time around with TJ, the Steelers did that. He made them look smart by immediately going out there, tying the NFL sack record. So that's the calculation that they need to come to again. And if you're TJ, yeah, you've got to find that kind of happy medium between, okay, this is what I'm worth based on what I've done versus understanding I am getting older and a team needs to compensate me for what they think I'm still capable of doing in the league.
Yeah, right now, 30 years old. My only concern is that his best football would already be behind him. And at what point those results start diminishing? They say NFL, it means not for long. And it's a young man's league. I'm not trying to say that is happening right now at this moment in time with TJ Watt, but it's an inevitability when it comes to these negotiations. I think you hit the nail on the head, too, with the past performance.
Yeah, and TJ works as hard as anybody. We know that. He's I joke about him about the move into dad mode, but he's probably going to be grinding just as much as he ever had to, yes, not only stay on the field, but be as explosive and dynamic as he's ever been. And, certainly now that he's at that big three is a big number. And, that 3-0 and then 31, 32, 33, that's oftentimes kind of the milestone for teams when they're looking at outside free agents and of course their own guys too. Now, Cam Hayward is defying age at this stage of his career, and the Steelers look wise for extending him last offseason when they did, and maybe TJ will be the same way. But that's kind of the tough thing when you start to try to compare yourself to a guy like Maxx Crosby, who is a little bit younger. And there, the other two dominoes in this market who you haven't mentioned so far, Mark, are Myles Garrett, who clearly wants out of Cleveland, and Trey Hendrickson, who looks like he's going to get out of Cincinnati, or at least they are willing to oblige him there if the Browns aren't with Garrett. So those two might also reset the market. I mean, Maxx Crosby's deal might get blown up here in the next weeks or months to come, kind of like Minka a couple of years ago, and he was the highest paid safety for a few weeks before Derwin James got his deal done. So that's always how it goes. I don't know that you ever want to be the last one in these scenarios, but we know how the Steelers have operated traditionally. They take these things up kind of right till they need to get something hammered out, and it might complicate things with TJ this offseason.
There's not a world where they would let him walk on the free agent market after their season, is there?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that I Bleav them when they say they value things like a one helmet guy. And I mean, he's kind of the face of the team and has been for a while now, at least from a player perspective. I think he's by far the most popular Steeler. I don't know about down in Raleigh, but you walk around Pittsburgh on any given day in the fall and you're going to see a lot of number 90 jerseys. So I think there's something to that. I think that doesn't mean that you let sentimentality get in the way of business, because it is a bottom line business at the end of the day. But I think TJ is someone who it'd be very tough for the Steelers to move on from and let that happen. They've done it to some past greats, but we've also seen a lot of Steelers never put on another jersey. Troy Polamalu, Hines Ward, Ben Roethlisberger. I think that's the path they want TJ to walk. And I wasn't sure about him from his perspective, Mark, but talking to him on locker cleanout day in January, I didn't get any vibes of discontent or dissatisfaction. It sure seems like he wants to remain here and isn't frustrated by the lack of postseason success. Frustrated, yes, but not to the point of wanting out.
All right, we're going to change gears here. Free agency starts next week. I try to read everything I can about this. As it stands right now at this moment in time, how I foresee this is that Fields will be back. Russell Wilson will be elsewhere. What do you see happening when it comes to the quarterbacks? That's the sentiment that I get, but a lot can happen in negotiations. Let's start with the quarterbacks and go from there of how you see it shaking out between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields.
Yeah, I definitely get the vibe too that the Steelers would like to go with the younger option, guy who was 4-2 and provided some optimism and confidence before they made the switch to Russell Wilson. And I think if anything, it would have been a little uh, unfair to Fields almost to pivot back to him late in that season after you got so far down the road with Russ as the starter. The fact that Fields hasn't started a game since that Week 6 win in Vegas, it's a better scenario for him to kind of reset and refresh, whether he's back here or anywhere else. That's why I think he might have more of a market than 36-year-old Russell Wilson at this stage of the game and in their respective careers. So, that is, the ultimate catch 22. If you're Fields, do you go with the team that you had some success with last season? You finally had a more stable organization and less weight on your shoulders than you were the 4 years you were in 3 years you were in Chicago. Or do you say, hey, this team benched me ultimately, or at least they replaced me when the original guy got healthy, and maybe I'll go somewhere else that I don't have that history with. But then you're, potentially getting yourself into a situation where this team also drafts a quarterback in the first or second round. What does that mean for the long-term starting potential in 25? I think Fields is the best option. At least you can kind of talk yourself into a chance of him putting it all together and finally figuring it out in another year with Arthur Smith. I just think we kind of saw what Russell Wilson is at this point, and a lot would have to fall into place and go right for him to turn around and flip the script from what we saw those last 5 games.
With Russell Wilson, I think a reunion with Pete Carroll in Las Vegas is a possibility, but also the Giants. However, the Giants could be in a scenario where they draft a quarterback. And what I'm talking about is at the top of the draft, if they like Cam Ward to trade up, or Shedeur Sanders as well. So he could be in the same scenario that you just described with Fields.
Well, I think Russell Wilson probably needs to be honest with himself at a certain point here of where he is right now in the NFL hierarchy among quarterbacks. It might be time to kind of just admit, okay, I'm going to be a bridge type of quarterback. I'm going to be a veteran mentor. That's kind of like a rung above, the career backup Case Keenum's, Jimmy Garoppolo's of the world at this point. But nobody plays forever. Nobody starts forever except for Tom Brady. And I guess we'll see what becomes of Aaron Rodgers this offseason too. So, yeah, I mean, Russell Wilson might just have to take whatever opportunity is there. And maybe it's a relatively bleak one where you're the starter in front of a highly drafted rookie and you only keep the job as long as you can play well and win games, whether 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, knowing that there's an expiration date on you. But again, there's only 32 of these jobs. Some teams are clearly rebuilding and maybe don't want to be in the high floor, low ceiling Russell Wilson business. So, yeah, I think there are going to be kind of limited options for him, at least if he wants to be a clear-cut starter. So, that's just the reality of it. I don't even know how much Aaron Rodgers is going to be well received on the open market and the way he played last season. I think a lot of teams are going to be a little skittish after what they saw, what went down with Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. You get into business with these aging quarterbacks and things can go sideways.
Is it within Justin Fields' best interests to make sure he gets to next week when the legal negotiating window opens up and free agency opens up to explore all of his options? And the reason I ask that is I know general manager Omar Khan has said that he wants to re-sign either Wilson or Fields before that window opens up. Is it to the player's benefit to wait? Because I'm just trying to figure out the timing of all of this, Brian.
Well, I think it usually is because, I mean, you want, if you have any job, I mean, would you want to negotiate with one company, or would you want 30 other companies to also come in and potentially tell you what they're willing to pay you? It still might not be as much as your original one, but maybe it will be. You don't know unless you get to that opportunity. And that's why I think these deals are always difficult to get done, is because if you're the player, to avoid free agency and not keep all avenues open, you got to really be blown away by a deal, right? That's just common sense. And if you're a team, you don't want to feel like you are overpaying for any commodity, let alone a quarterback who only did start 6 games for you last year in the end. So they were in a similar situation, Mark, last year with Mason Rudolph. It's not apples to apples, but we know how strong he finished the season. Obviously, get done in the playoff game in Buffalo, but there was a lot of talk of, okay, are they going to run it back with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph? And if that's the case, can they get something done with Rudolph before free agency? Obviously, they didn't and went in a completely different direction with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. But we're Khan and Rooney last year too, that they would like to bring back Rudolph and do business with him again. So talk is cheap. The moves themselves are what matter a lot more. Follow more of what the Steelers do than what they say, and that's what casts a little bit of doubt on the Fields Steelers reunion as we sit here on late Friday.
All right, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, Brian, is with free agency starting next week, are there position groups of positions of need that you expect the Steelers to address in free agency compared to the draft, and then vice versa? Are there certain positions where you say, okay, I expect the Steelers to address in free agency, and then these are the groups that I would expect them to address in the draft? How do you foresee that?
Yeah, I think cornerback will be the top priority in free agency because to me, you need a veteran presence in there to go, start opposite Joey Porter Jr., compete with maybe Corey Trice Jr., and it helps, I think, to have another savvier player. Joey Porter Jr. still only going into year 3, and I think we saw last year that he's far from a 50 product to this point. I still Bleav in him. I still think he could become an all-pro type of cornerback in this league, but he's not there yet. So I would hesitate to kind of, leave him as, the top dog in the room and not have anybody else out there with considerable NFL experience. I'm not giving up on Corey Trice Jr. yet either. So I don't know that I would break the bank for somebody, but I would try to get good value from someone who started games at corner in this league already and can continue to start in 2025. I would also want to, add a guy or two on the defensive line and probably try to upgrade from Van Jefferson at wide receiver, knowing full well you might end up using your first 2 draft picks on those 2 positions also. But the Steelers have traditionally done that in the past too. I think back to my first year on the beat, they signed Mark Bergin at inside linebacker, didn't stop them from drafting Devin Bush 10th overall. They signed Dante Moncrief at wide receiver, didn't stop them from drafting Deontay Johnson with their next pick. So I think that's kind of their playbook that way. And you're covering all bases if you strike out in the draft or if the guy that you bring in here isn't quite ready to contribute yet.
I'd be okay with double dipping. Are there any names specifically? You mentioned corner in free agency. Are there any names of free agents that are out there that you think that the Steelers could target?
Yeah, I think DJ Reed is going to top a lot of people. He's still under 30. Was the Robin to Sauce Gardner's Batman with the Jets, and I think he's a feisty guy on the outside, but he might be pretty pricey. He might get the highest quarterback deal this year. Asante Samuel Jr. From the Chargers is a smaller guy, but he's played outside, so I think he's a nice complement potentially to a Joey Porter Jr. in addition to 2 guys whose dads were Pro Bowl players in the NFL. I feel like if I know anything about Mike Tomlin, he would absolutely love that dynamic of Joey Porter Jr., Asante Samuel Jr. holding down the fort at cornerback. So those are 2 names that come to mind for me. Byron Murphy is another one. I think he was in that 2019 draft too. I wouldn't have been surprised if the Steelers had picked him if the Devin Bush pick didn't work out for them in that year. So he's somebody who's been around too with the Cardinals and the Vikings. Those are just 3 names. Probably know Steelers don't have interest in any of them and want to go a completely different way at corner.
He is Brian Batko. You can check out his work over at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Brian, I thank you for your time today.
No problem, Mark. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you to Brian Batko. This has been another edition of Bleav in Steelers on Apple and Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review, and on the Mark Bergin YouTube page, hit that subscribe button. We'll be back here on this show as news happens with free agency, so keep it here on Bleav in Steelers. Hope all of you have great weekends. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care. So long, everybody.